The automatic doors of Hudson General Hospital slid shut with a soft, pneumatic hiss, sealing the warmth and the light inside and leaving Lou Fleming standing in the cold. The overhang sheltered her, but the dampness was pervasive, a chill that seeped through the layers of her trench coat and settled deep in her marrow. Lou didn't move. She stood staring at the darkened glass of the sliding doors, watching her own reflection ghost over the brightly lit lobby beyond. She looked wrecked. Her posture, usually so upright, so commanding, was slumped, as if the structural integrity of her spine had finally given way. She was waiting. That was all she could do now. She was waiting for her daughter and Lisa to finish saying goodbye to the man Lou wasn't allowed to see. Inside her chest, the frantic panic of the last hour was beginning to cool. It was hardening, crystallizing into something sharp and jagged. For weeks, Lou had been running on adrenaline, fueled by the desperate need to prove her innocence, to save the business, to wake Amy up from the trance Nathan Price had put her in. She had fought, screamed, investigated, and begged. She had believed that if she just tried hard enough, if she just found the right piece of evidence, the fever would break and Amy would come back to her. But standing there in the cold, listening to the rain assault the pavement, Lou realized with a sudden sickening clarity that the fever wasn't going to break. Amy wasn't sick. Amy wasn't just a victim. Amy had made a choice. Lou replayed the scene in the hallway over and over again. It wasn't the words that haunted her. It was the eyes. Amy's eyes hadn't been clouded with confusion. They had been clear. They had been cold. They had looked at Lou not as a sister, but as an obstacle to be removed. Amy had stood there, flanked by Nathan like a queen with her executioner. And she had delivered the sentence with a steady voice. It was the voluntary nature of it that cut the deepest. Yes, Nathan was whispering poison in her ear. Yes, he had manipulated the video and the timeline. But Amy had chosen to listen. Amy had chosen to stand in front of that door and block Lou from the grandfather who had raised them both. Amy had chosen to humiliate her in front of strangers, to weaponize Jack's heart attack to settle a score. She looked away from the doors, turning her gaze toward the parking lot. It was a sea of gray and black shadows stretching between the streetlights. Somewhere out there, in a sleek car or a warm cafeteria, Amy and Nathan were likely sitting together. Lou could almost picture it. Nathan would be offering her coffee, his voice low and soothing, telling her how brave she was. He would be rewriting the narrative of the night, turning Amy's cruelty into heroism. You saved him, Amy. You did what had to be done. And Amy would be nodding. She would be drinking it in, letting his validation fill the hole where her conscience used to be. A surge of nausea rolled over Lou. It wasn't just anger. It was revulsion. She felt physically sick at the thought of them together, conspiring against the family, while Jack lay hooked up to machines just a few walls away. I'm done, Lou thought. The sound of her own voice was lost in the rain, but the words felt heavy, like stones dropping into a deep well. Jack and Lou had always worried together. That was the deal. The Fleming girls and their grandfather against the world. They fought, yes. They screamed at each other over dinner, over boys, over business decisions, but there was always a line. There was a sacred, invisible boundary that none of them ever crossed. You didn't weaponize the family bond. You didn't shut the door when someone was hurting. Amy had not just crossed that line, she had erased it. Lou closed her eyes, letting the darkness behind her lids block out the glare of the hospital lights. She thought about the years she had spent protecting Amy. When their mom died, Lou had been the one to step in to try and fill the void, to manage the chaos so Amy could grieve, so Amy could focus on her gift with horses. Lou had taken the heat, made the hard calls so that Amy could be the miracle girl. And this was the repayment. A banishment. A public shunning. Never again, Lou thought. The vow formed in her mind. cold and absolute. She would not call. She would not text. She would not drive over to the farmhouse to beg for forgiveness for crimes she didn't commit. If Amy wanted to be alone with Nathan, she would get exactly what she wished for. Lou was going to give her the silence she demanded. Lou opened her eyes. The tears were gone. In their place was a numbness that felt like armor. She wasn't the frantic sister anymore. She was a mother who needed to protect her daughter, and a granddaughter who needed to find a way to save her grandfather without stepping foot on the property. She checked her watch. It had been 20 minutes. Katie and Lisa should be coming out soon. Lou adjusted her coat, buttoning it to the chin. She smoothed her wet hair back. She needed to look strong for Katie. She couldn't let Katie see her broken. Katie needed to know that they had a plan, that they were surviving this. Lou turned back to the doors, watching them slide open. A rush of warm, antiseptic air hit her face, carrying the sounds of the lobby, the low murmur of voices, the ringing of phones. Lou took a deep breath, inhaling the wet, cold air. It tasted like exile. It tasted like the end of an era. The Heartland she knew, the warm kitchen, the family dinners, the shared burden was dead. It had died the moment Jack hit the floor, and Amy had stepped over his body to stand by Nathan's side. She turned her back to the glass, facing the rain. The intensive care unit was a world removed from the storm raging outside. Here there was no wind, no rain, only the artificial stillness of a place hovering between life and death. The air was dry, scrubbed clean of any organic scent, smelling faintly of heated electronics and rubbing alcohol. Katie walked behind Lisa, her sneakers making no sound on the pristine floor. The walls were lined with glass partitions, and behind each one lay a person fighting a silent war. But Katie kept her eyes on the floor, afraid to look. Lisa stopped. She reached back and squeezed Katie's hand, her fingers cold and trembling. They stepped inside. The first thing Katie noticed was the noise, not the silence, but the cacophony of quiet machines. The room was alive with beeps, hums, and whirs, a digital symphony keeping time for a heart that had failed to keep its own. Then she saw him. Jack lay in the center of the nest of wires and tubes. He was elevated slightly, propped up by pillows that looked too white against his gray skin. The oxygen mask had been replaced by a nasal cannula, but he still looked trapped. There were IV lines running into both arms, and electrodes stuck to his chest, peeking out from the open hospital gown. He looked ancient. That was the thought that struck Katie with the force of a physical blow. Her great-grandfather, the man who threw hay bales, who rode horses with a straight back and a steady hand, had evaporated. In his place was a fragile, withered man whose chest rose and fell with a terrifying, shallow labor. Jack's eyes were closed, but as they approached, his eyelids fluttered. They opened slowly, heavy with sedation and exhaustion. The blue eyes, usually so sharp and twinkling, were cloudy and dim. He saw Lisa first, a flicker of recognition, a slight softening of the tension in his jaw. Then, his gaze drifted to Katie. The change was immediate. His eyes widened, just a fraction. He tried to lift his hand, the one not taped to a board for the IV, but it barely rose an inch off the mattress before falling back. Katie didn't wait. She moved past Lisa, rushing to the side of the bed. She grabbed his hand, the hand that felt rough and calloused, familiar territory in this alien landscape, and held it tight with both of hers. Gigi. Jack looked at her. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, his voice a rusted hinge.
Katie girl.
The sound of her nickname, broken and weak, shattered Katie's composure. A tear escaped, tracking hot down her cheek, but she furiously wiped it away with her shoulder. She couldn't be a crying child right now. She had to be strong. Lou needed her to be strong. It's okay. Don't try to talk. Just listen, okay? Jack blinked, a slow acknowledgement. He looked past her, his eyes searching the doorway, searching the shadows behind Lisa. He was looking for Lou. The realization hit Katie in the gut. Her mom was standing outside in the rain because Amy had barred the door. Katie leaned in close, bringing her face down so her whisper was just for him. She needed to be the bridge. She needed to be the wire that connected the severed parts of the family. "She's here, Grandpa. Mom is here. She's just outside." Jack's brow furrowed. Confusion clouded his eyes. He didn't understand why Lou wasn't at the bedside. Katie squeezed his hand harder, trying to ground him. Amy wouldn't let her in. She thinks Mom upsets you. But Mom is waiting. She loves you so much. She wanted to come in, but Katie swallowed the anger that threatened to rise up. This wasn't the place for anger. This was the place for strategy. "We have to go away for a little while. Me and Mom." Jack's head moved slightly on the pillow. A microscopic panic flared in his eyes. The idea of them leaving, of the family shattering further, clearly terrified him. Katie moved her hand to his cheek, stroking the rough stubble there. No, it's okay. We aren't going away for a long time. We're just retreating. We can't stay at Heartland right now. Nathan, he's twisted everything. And Amy isn't listening." Jack closed his eyes for a moment, a look of profound pain crossing his face. He knew. Even in his fog, he knew the truth of it. "But listen to me. We aren't disappearing. I'm going to contact you through Dex. I'm going to text him every day. I'm going to tell him where we are. And he's going to tell you. Okay? You act like you don't know, but Dex will be our messenger." A faint spark appeared in Jack's eyes. It was the old Jack, the stubborn, defiant patriarch who hated being managed. He gave a barely perceptible nod. He understood. It was a resistance movement. Katie felt a surge of fierce pride. She wasn't just a kid getting dragged along anymore. She was an operative. "Mom is going to fix this, Grandpa. I know she looks like the bad guy right now, but she's the only one fighting for you. She's going to prove that Nathan is a liar." She swore it. Jack's hand twitched in hers. He squeezed her fingers. It was a weak grip, barely a flutter of pressure, but it was there. It was an endorsement. The exertion of the moment caught up with him. Jack's breath hitched, and a small, dry cough rattled his chest. The monitor beeped a warning tone, not critical, but demanding attention. Lisa stepped forward, placing a hand on Katie's shoulder. "Katie, we shouldn't tire him out." The nurse said 5 minutes. Katie nodded. She knew time was up. She looked back at Jack. He looked exhausted, his skin gray again, the spark fading as fatigue took over. "I have to go now. But I'll be back. I promise. Whenever I can, I'll find a way." Jack looked at her with a profound sadness. His eyes were wet. He looked at Katie, then he looked toward the window where the rain was lashing against the glass, thinking of Lou standing out there in the cold. He tried to say something. His lips moved, forming a shape. "Lou, I'll tell her. I'll tell her you love her." Jack closed his eyes, a single tear escaping from the corner and tracking into his hairline. It was a surrender. He couldn't fight Amy and Nathan right now. He didn't have the breath, but he could hold on to this promise. Katie leaned down. She kissed his forehead. It felt cool and clammy, smelling of hospital soap. "Stay strong, Grandpa. We're coming back for you." She pulled away, her hand lingering on his for one last second before letting go. The loss of contact felt physical, like a lifeline being cut. Lisa stepped up, pressing a quick, gentle kiss to Jack's hand. "Rest, Jack. Just rest. We're here. Call us whenever you need to." They walked out of the room. The transition from the intimate quiet of the bedside to the hallway felt jarring. Katie took a deep breath, trying to steady her shaking legs. She had delivered the message. The pact was made. She looked up at Lisa. Lisa looked torn apart, caught between two warring sisters and a dying husband. He knows, Lisa. He knows Mom didn't do it. Lisa wrapped an arm around Katie's shoulders and steered her toward the exit. But as they walked, Katie looked back one last time at the glass wall of room 4. Jack was lying still, his eyes closed. But as she watched, she saw his hand, the one she had held, move slightly, resting over his heart. He was holding on to the promise. Lou Fleming had not gone to the car. Despite the nurse's orders, despite Amy's banishment, and despite the cold water seeping into her boots, she had moved only as far as the vestibule just outside the main glass doors of the ICU ward. She stood in the shadow of a vending machine, pressing herself against the wall, out of the direct line of sight of the nurse's station, but close enough to see the hallway that led to room 4. She was shivering violently now. The adrenaline that had sustained her during the drive was gone, replaced by a bone-deep chill. Her coat was heavy with rainwater, smelling of damp wool and ozone. Every time the automatic doors to the ward hissed open, she held her breath, hoping for a glimpse, a sign, anything. She felt like a criminal. She, who had run Heartland's books for a decade, who had managed crises that would have broken lesser women, was now skulking in a hallway like a fugitive. The injustice of it burned in her throat like bile, but she couldn't leave. Not until she saw Katie, not until she knew Jack was still breathing. The doors opened. Lou straightened up, wiping her wet face with her sleeve. Lisa and Katie emerged. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck washing ashore. Lisa was pale, walking with a fragility that terrified Lou. Katie looked older than her years, her face set in a grim expression of determination that mirrored Lou's own. Lou stepped out from the shadows.
Katie?
Katie looked up. Relief flooded her face, and she ran the few steps to her mother, burying her face in Lou's damp coat. "He's okay, Mom. He's awake." Lou gripped her daughter's shoulders, looking over her head at Lisa.
Lisa? How is he really?
Lisa stopped. She looked at Lou, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. She looked exhausted, caught in the crossfire of a war she hadn't started and couldn't finish. "He's weak, Lou. His heart. It took a massive hit. But he's fighting."
Respiratory therapy tools. Stat.
Lou looked past Lisa. Through the still open glass doors of the ward, the nurse at the station was distracted by a phone call. The hallway behind them was clear for a brief moment. And there, through the glass window of room 4, the blinds had been left partially open by a careless orderly. Jack was lying there. He was looking at the door. He was looking for them. Lou's breath hitched. She took a step forward, drawn by a magnetic pull she couldn't resist. She pressed her hand against the cold glass of the partition wall. Jack's eyes shifted. He saw the movement. He saw the dark shape of the trench coat, the familiar silhouette of his eldest granddaughter. Time seemed to stop. The noises of the hospital, the beeping monitors, the squeaking carts, the distant chatter faded into a dull roar. There was only the visual connection between them. Jack's face softened. Even through the glass, even through the haze of sedation and pain, Lou saw it. His eyes crinkled at the corners, that familiar, comforting expression he used when she was a teenager crying over a broken heart. He lifted his hand just a fraction of an inch off the sheet. And then he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a sad, broken, apologetic smile. It was a smile that said, "I know. I'm sorry. I love you." Lou felt a sob rip through her chest, but she clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle it. That look was everything. It was absolution. It was the armor she needed to survive the exile that was coming. Jack's eyes held hers for one more second before they fluttered closed. the effort of the connection exhausting him. The view was gone. Lou was staring at her own reflection in the glass again, but this time the woman staring back wasn't broken. She was vindicated. She turned to Lisa. She didn't ask to go back in. She didn't argue. She just pulled Lisa into a fierce, desperate hug.
Watch him, Lisa. Don't let Nathan near him alone. Please, I will make it right.
I won't. I promise. Lou pulled back. She nodded. She took Katie's hand, gripping it tight.
Let's go.
They turned toward the elevators, but as they rounded the corner of the waiting area, the elevator doors chimed. Amy and Nathan stepped out. They were holding coffee cups. Nathan looked fresh, composed, speaking in a low, soothing tone to Amy. Amy looked pale but resolute, her jaw set in a line of stubborn righteousness. They stopped dead when they saw Lou and Katie. The hallway narrowed. The air tension spiked, electric and dangerous. Amy stiffened. Her grip on the cardboard coffee cup tightened until the lid popped slightly. She took a breath, preparing for the assault. She expected Lou to scream. She expected Lou to beg. She expected a scene that would validate everything Nathan had just told her about Lou's instability. Nathan stepped slightly in front of Amy, a protective, proprietary move. He opened his mouth, a condescending placation ready on his lips.
Lou, I thought we agreed.
Lou didn't stop. She didn't slow down. She didn't even blink. She walked straight toward them, holding Katie's hand. As she drew level with Amy, Amy braced herself, her eyes darting to Lou's face, waiting for the impact. But Lou looked right through her. Lou's eyes were fixed on the exit sign at the end of the hall. She treated Amy not as a sister, not as an enemy, but as a piece of furniture. A ghost. A nothing. The silence of that pass was deafening. It was louder than any scream Lou could have mustered. It was a total, absolute erasure of Amy's existence. Katie didn't look at Amy either. She kept her head down, clutching her mother's hand, leaving Amy standing there with her coffee and her manipulator. Lou pushed through the double doors at the end of the hall without looking back once. Amy stood frozen in the hallway. The interaction, or lack of it, had thrown her off balance. She felt a sudden cold draft, as if a part of her soul had just walked out of the building.
See, she knows she's beaten. She can't even look you in the eye.
Amy blinked, shaking off the chill. She looked at Nathan. His interpretation made sense. It had to make sense. Lou was ashamed. That was it.
Yeah, she knows she's wrong.
But as she turned back toward the ICU, the coffee in her hand felt heavy, and the silence in the hallway felt less like victory and more like a graveyard.
Come on, Jack needs us. Let's go see him.
They walked toward the ward doors, leaving the wet footprints of Lou Fleming to dry and fade on the floor behind them. The air inside the intensive care unit felt different than the hallway. It was thinner, sharper, pressurized to keep the outside world at bay. Amy Fleming stepped across the threshold, her hand trembling slightly around the paper coffee cup she was still clutching like a talisman. Beside her, Nathan Price walked with the confident, measured stride of a man inspecting a property he intended to acquire. Amy's heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that felt out of sync with the slow, steady beeping of the monitors around them. She told herself she was ready. She told herself that Jack would understand. Nathan had explained it so clearly. Jack was a victim of stress, a victim of Lou's chaotic mismanagement and emotional volatility. By banning Lou, Amy hadn't just been petty. She had been a medical guardian. She had prioritized his heart over her sister's feelings. It was the hard choice, the CEO choice. And surely, once Jack saw her face, the face of the granddaughter who stayed, who didn't run away to Vancouver, who was building the future, he would be grateful. They reached room 4. The blinds were partially open, slicing the gray daylight into thin, dusty strips across the bed. Amy paused at the door. Through the glass, she saw him. He was propped up looking towards the window where the rain was still lashing against the pane. The grandfather, who had always seemed carved out of granite, was now just paper and bone.
Go on. He needs to know you're here.
Amy nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She pushed the sliding glass door open. The sound of the room hit her instantly. The hiss of the oxygen, the hum of the bed motor, the smell of antiseptic soap and old age.
Grandpa.
Jack didn't move immediately. He was staring at the window, watching the rivulets of water chase each other down the glass. His hand, the one Katie had held just moments ago, was resting on his chest, rising and falling with his labored breathing. Slowly, painfully, Jack turned his head. Amy took a step forward, a smile trembling on her lips, ready to offer comfort, ready to explain everything.
It's me. I'm here.
Jack's eyes found hers. Amy stopped. The warmth she expected, the relief, the gratitude wasn't there. Jack's eyes were clear, terrifyingly clear, despite the drugs in his system. They were blue ice. They looked at her and then they looked past her, to Nathan standing in the doorway. The expression on Jack's face wasn't anger. Anger would have been a connection. Anger would have meant he was engaging with them. This was something far worse. It was a complete, hollow detachment. It was the look a man gives to a stranger who has walked into the wrong house. Jack looked at them for 3 seconds. 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. And then, with a deliberate, agonizing slowness, he turned his head back to the window. He presented his back to them. Amy felt the blood drain from her face. It was a physical slap.
Grandpa, please, look at me. I did it for you. I had to tell Lou to leave. She was too upset.
Jack didn't flinch. He didn't acknowledge her voice. He stared at the rain, his hand gripping the bedsheet with a white-knuckled intensity. The nurse, who had been at the station, a different one from the intake nurse, older, sterner, bustled in, checking the monitors. She saw the spike in Jack's heart rate on the screen. Mr. Bartlett, is everything all right? Are you in pain? Jack didn't look at Amy. He looked at the nurse. He lifted his hand weakly, gesturing toward the door, toward Amy and Nathan. His voice was a wreck, a dry whisper that sounded like leaves scraping on pavement.
I don't want
He had to stop to breathe. The effort was costing him.
them.
The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Not him, them. He was including Amy. He was lumping her in with the man who had tried to steal his land. The nurse looked at Amy, her expression hardening. He heard him.
No, he's confused. He thinks I'm Lou. Grandpa, it's Amy. It's me.
Amy stepped closer, reaching for the bed rail, desperate to force him to see her, to force him to validate her narrative. Jack squeezed his eyes shut. He brought a shaking hand up to his ear, covering it, trying to block out the sound. It was a gesture of pure revulsion. The nurse moved instantly. She stepped between Amy and the bed, her body acting as a shield. That is enough. His heart rate is spiking. You need to leave. Now. Amy stared at the back of Jack's head. She waited for him to turn around. She waited for him to say, "Wait, not Amy. Let Amy stay." She waited for the special bond they had shared since she was a little girl in the barn to save her. But Jack kept his hand over his ear. He kept his eyes on the rain. He was shutting her out.
Come on, he's delirious. Don't fight the nurse. It looks bad.
Nathan pulled her. Amy resisted for a fraction of a second, her feet rooting to the floor. But the look on the nurse's face was final. She let herself be guided backward. They backed out of the room. The nurse followed them to the threshold, grabbing the handle of the sliding glass door. She looked at Amy one last time, not with sympathy, but with judgment. We will call you if his status changes. Do not come back in until you are invited. The door closed. Amy was standing in the hallway. She was on the outside, just like Lou. She stared through the glass. The nurse was leaning over Jack, adjusting his pillow, speaking softly to him. Jack lowered his hand from his ear. He looked relaxed now. The tension had left his shoulders the moment Amy had left the room. Amy felt a crushing weight settle in her stomach. It was the guilt. It was the terrifying realization that Nathan might be wrong.
He wouldn't even look at me.
It's the medication, Amy. Opiates, sedatives.
He said then. He covered his ears.
Amy looked at Nathan. His eyes were so sure, so confident. He had an answer for everything. An answer that made it okay. An answer that meant she wasn't the villain. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. Because if he was wrong, if Jack knew exactly who she was and still turned away, then she had lost everything. Nathan offered his arm. Amy looked at the closed door of room 4. She looked at the back of her grandfather's head one last time. Then she turned away. She took Nathan's arm. Inside the room, Jack watched the reflection in the window. He saw them leave. He let out a long, shaky breath. A single tear tracked through the stubble on his cheek. He closed his eyes, his hand moving to cover his heart, holding on to the ghost of the promise Katie had whispered to him.